RBI Governor Subbarao said the battle against inflation hasn't ended and that some sacrifice to growth is inevitable. Subbarao also observed that much of the criticism is coming from what he called the very articulate growth lobby. Let's take it across to banking editor George Cherian for more perspective on that. George, how are we to read these statements coming in from Subbarao? He's saying all this in New York.
Well, Sandeep, this is something that he's said in the past as well, that, monetary policy can't be expected to handle the job of overall economic growth for any country. And I think that's the story that plays out in any economy that you see. It's the same story that you're seeing play out in the US as well, where everyone's expecting the Federal Reserve to set things right when it's actually fiscal policy that ought to be doing the job. It's exactly the same story over here. And what the RBI governor is really saying is that lowering interest rates by, even 200 basis points, 300 basis points is not going to get the job done. You've got to move on the fiscal front. You've got to address issues on the supply side. You've got to address, infrastructure bottlenecks if you want to see growth come back. So just by cutting interest rates doesn't mean that you're going to take growth back to, whatever, 8.5%, 9% levels. And these are things that, somewhere the corporate lobby has chosen to attack the Reserve Bank of India because it's an apolitical organization. They aren't going to come out in their defense or pick on anyone if they were criticized. Whereas the corporate lobby knows that, taking on the government and blaming them or, accusing them of not doing anything could have certain repercussions for them. So the easy way out is to continue to, accuse the RBI of doing nothing on the monetary policy front, because of which growth is stuttering along. Now, you need to remember that if you look back to some of the years earlier, 2007-08, for example, when interest rates were already high, you had average lending rates a little above 13%. You actually had private sector investment come in at something like over 17% of GDP. Today, interest rates are pretty much at those levels, maybe slightly higher, but you have private sector investment virtually at a halt. Nothing is moving on the ground. Can you accuse interest rates for being the culprit? Absolutely not. Everyone you speak to in the corporate sector tells you that it's policy inaction on the part of the government that is leading to all this slowdown on the private investment front. And all of us know that for a country that is driven by, a growing country like ours, unless we address issues on the supply side, you aren't going to be able to bring inflation under control. You aren't going to be able to support growth at current levels. So it's clearly the government's job to get things moving. And the RBI governor is absolutely right in saying that I'm not going to tinker with interest rates. You guys get your act together. You do what's necessary on the fiscal side. And then maybe I can support you by way of some amount of monetary policy action. But I've done what I could. It's for you guys to act now, and I will follow.
Okay, George, thanks as always for that perspective.